argument.
Number 2.
The Vikings. I mean, listen, they're beating good teams. The last 4 wins are the Niners, the Texans, the Packers, and the Jets. They lead the NFL in point differential. Their rush defense is fantastic. Some of the reason the Jets aren't running, they couldn't run. This Brian Flores, I know he's got a lawsuit with the NFL. That dude can coach. That dude can flat coach. That's the best coaching staff to me outside of Kansas City in the league. Spags and Reed is what's happening in Minnesota.
Yeah. So this is really interesting. As you can see, right, here's the top 10. Minnesota Vikings, number 2. Pretty remarkable when you think about how far the Minnesota Vikings have come and how quickly they reached the levels that they have reached. But it's interesting. As you saw, if you see on my channel, that I had posted a video where they're pretty much still making a joke out of Sam Darnold, right? Calling him a pumpkin. Nick Wright has a literal pumpkin on the table saying, what will happen first? This pumpkin will rot and turn to mush, or will Sam Darnold, just flop and be terrible? That's kind of still how much people still doubt what the Minnesota Vikings are doing and what they're accomplishing. And it's really interesting to me because the Vikings win over the Jets just got Robert Saleh fired, right? That was the last straw, right? Making Aaron Rodgers look absolutely pedestrian and the Jets just looking absolutely mediocre. And I know it wasn't an ideal offensive game for the Vikings, but again, not every game is going to be perfect. Not every win is going to be perfect. And I feel like people were even kind of using that win as like a way to like undercut what the Vikings are doing. And it's just doesn't really make a whole lot of sense to me because we saw the 49ers win look a lot more free and effortless versus the Jets. And now look at what the 49ers look like right now. They're struggling just to win while the Minnesota Vikings keep on winning. They just keep winning and winning and winning and winning and winning. And what's interesting is this. I was thinking about this when I saw this list. You have the Minnesota Vikings and you have the Kansas City Chiefs. Now, if we knew nothing about these teams, right? This is a thought experiment that I keep doing with other quarterbacks as well. If we knew nothing about these teams, we had no sense of who the coaches were, in terms of their past accomplishments, what the past of their quarterbacks are, right? We had no idea, essentially, that Sam Darnold was a New York Jet and that Andy Reid and Patrick Mahomes have won multiple Super Bowls and all of this. If there was no sense of that at all, and we were just looking at it this season, you would probably have the Minnesota Vikings number 1, right? If you had no sense of anything else, because you're looking at 2 teams that are undefeated. But you would look at it and say the Minnesota Vikings are playing better than the Kansas City Chiefs. But you're going to have more trust with the Kansas City Chiefs over the Minnesota Vikings because it is indeed the Kansas City Chiefs, right? We've seen what Patrick Mahomes, Andy Reid, Spags, Travis Kelce, right? We've seen it, and we've seen it again and again and again and again. So we know what they're capable of. We know they're not going to be outplayed come time playoffs. So it's like they're going to be the number 1 because, quite frankly, they earned it in a lot of ways, even if they're not playing perfect, great ball right now. So that, to me, is what's really interesting more than anything, is will the Kansas City Chiefs be able to maintain that in the playoffs? Or if the Vikings played the Chiefs in the Super Bowl, would the Vikings prove to be the better team or not? Or when the moment calls for it, will the Vikings shrink a little bit or just not be able to take advantage in the ways that the Kansas City Chiefs have been able to year after year after year, game after game after game? To me, those are where the questions lie that are really, really interesting. But the sheer fact that the Minnesota Vikings are ahead of every other team, not the Chiefs, is pretty remarkable. It is legitimately remarkable, especially when you look at the Baltimore Ravens and Lamar Jackson and Derrick Henry, right? Josh Allen and the Buffalo Bills, right? Like you're talking about big teams. The Bengals aren't even up there. I mean, for the longest time, it's always seen as the top teams are the Chiefs, the 49ers, the Bills, and the Ravens and the Bengals, right? Like those have consistently been, these are the top teams, these are the top teams, these are the top teams. And now you have the Minnesota Vikings number 2, which in this era, in this dynasty of the Chiefs, may as well be number 1, right? The Chiefs will keep getting that benefit of the doubt until they lose, right? Until they're no longer the champions. And until then, of course, they're going to get it, and understandably and rightfully so. So this is just, again, the Minnesota Vikings and how this story keeps unfolding just continues to be just wild to me. And the really interesting thing is this, and I think I've said this also in previous videos, is that, and as Colin emphasized it as well to a degree, is Brian Flores in this defense, right? Like, that is what makes this whole thing go round right now. Because you could look at the Chiefs and say, would the Chiefs really be as good as they are right now if it wasn't for their top defense? And the answer would be no. You could look at the Bengals, and the Bengals, Joe Burrow has been balling out, man. He's got like the best, he has like the most touchdowns in the league and only like 2 interceptions. He's like top 4, top 5 in passing yards. I mean, he's been awesome. And yet they have 1 win because their defense is awful. Absolutely awful, right? That's a problem. That is a legitimate problem. The Ravens defense is not what it has been in the past. It definitely felt like it was more dominant in years past, whereas this year it definitely seems that it's not quite there just yet, whether it's because of a new defensive coordinator or any other personnel issues. It's just not what it was. So that puts them slightly in their back foot. That makes them even more reliant on, say, Lamar Jackson. But with the Minnesota Vikings is they have the offensive firepower and they have the defensive just brick wall. You will not get past us. And that's what makes it so fascinating to me, because we see so many defensive coaches, or coordinators, coaches, whatever, just unable to consistently stop the Chiefs when it matters most. And considering Brian Flores' stock is just through the roof, you can't help but think, well, do they have what it takes to stop Patrick Mahomes and the Kansas City Chiefs? Can they stop Andy Reid's brilliance, right? And can Kevin O'Connell not be outcoached by Spags, the defensive coordinator for the Chiefs, right? Like, those are the questions that you got to ask yourself. Because no one in the NFC should scare you. Again, it's not to say that the Vikings are just absolutely going to go to the Super Bowl, but none of these other teams, you shouldn't be scared of the Lions, the Commanders, the Packers, right? The Falcons, the Cowboys. If you're a Minnesota Vikings fan, or you're an actual Minnesota Viking, if you're a player and you're watching this video for some odd reason, like, there's nothing that would scare you of these other teams. Not to say these other teams can't beat you, but you shouldn't be scared. You shouldn't be like, oh man, this is going to be a brutal game. I don't know. We got to hope for the best. Because the Minnesota Vikings have been that dominant, right? They even beat a handful of these teams that I've already named. But the question is the Kansas City Chiefs. Can you find that way? And of course, you gotta win, get to the playoffs, win throughout the playoffs, get to the Super Bowl. That's the only way it really ever matters to face the Chiefs. But it's just really interesting. And I really do firmly believe that if we had no idea who these teams were prior, who any of these players are, what they've done in the past, we would all say that the Minnesota Vikings are the number 1 team. And that goes a long way, and I think that means a lot. But the question remains, can they prove that they are truly deserving to be the actual bona fide, undeniable number 1 team in the NFL? But those are just my thoughts. I'd absolutely love to hear yours. What do you guys all think about the Minnesota Vikings to continue to be number 2 on Colin's herd hierarchy? Let me know in the comments below. I read every single comment, so whether you agree with me or disagree with me, either way, let's get in some discussions, let's get in some fights, but ultimately, let's just have some fun. And please do consider subscribing. We are building an amazing community here, and I'd absolutely love to see you part of it. I want to build something that we all genuinely feel connected to, something that we're really excited to be a part of. I think we're on our way to doing it. And please don't forget to give this video a thumbs up, as it really does help with the visibility and the algorithm. Thank you so much, and see you next time.